So welcome back to the channel, and today we have another interesting Q&A video. So the first question is, do you think fashion education is going to catch up with new innovations and manage to create industry-ready fashion students? Now, I can't really speak for every single part of fashion because there's so many aspects to fashion. There's the finance side of fashion, there's people like pattern makers, seamstresses, creative directors, journalists. There's so many roles in fashion. I can talk about fashion journalism because that's what I studied at CSM. And to be honest, I definitely see that my course was developing. There are many places, and the reason actually why I wanted to go to CSM is because my degree was actually fashion journalism, fashion communication, which means it's very different from the traditional fashion journalism courses that's all about writing. So on my course, we did things like podcast projects, we made films as part of our degree. Obviously, most of it was still writing, about 70%, but we even had a metaverse project. So it's clear that at least my degree, they're thinking of the role of a journalist. There's so many ways that you could be a journalist, and there's so many mediums to be a fashion journalist in that's why we had to explore all those different mediums. We also did a lot of graphic design as well, and created our own like print publications with so many different projects. So I think my degree, and I think a lot of degrees are starting to develop. I think when I first went to CSM, I was fighting a lot with this idea that I have a YouTube channel and journalists can make fashion videos. And I think by the time I was in second year, my lecturers kind of were on board with that idea because I was just pushing like, journalists need to be able to be good with video content and stuff like that because that's where fashion is going. Fashion journalism is going digital. I can't speak for fashion design because I didn't study fashion design, but from the sense I get from different fashion design students especially, I don't think they're very industry ready. I think it depends on the school you go to too. There are schools like Bunka in Japan is a fashion school where a lot of the focus is on the craft, on things like pattern making and sewing. And I think most of the people that go to school in Bunka are more industry ready because they're preparing you in a way to kind of work in the industry and to work within the framework of a big brand. Whereas if you go to a school like some St. Martin's, or you go to a school like IFM in Paris, well, IFM actually also kind of makes you more industry ready than CSM. CSM is more so, they want you to be like, have these crazy ideas and go on and create your own world. And these students, especially CSM, are so not business savvy. Like all the conversations I have with fashion design students from schools like CSM, they just do not have a clue on business. And it's not necessarily their fault. Like I'm quite young, I'm 25, but I've also been working in the fashion industry since I was 18. So for 7 years in different aspects of the industry. And when you have that much experience, you just understand the industry in a lot of different ways that a lot of the people that I went to school with that had never really worked in the industry, so they wouldn't understand it. They didn't really understand the business side. And to me, it's quite crazy that students that are expected to start their own brands don't know anything about business. That's just that's like a recipe for disaster. That's why so many London-based brands have so much talent. The talent is there. They're amazing designers, but just bad business decisions always makes them go under, like without fail. And so I think fashion education is still developing. But another kind of opinion I have is I think in a not too long from now, because college education in general, especially loads of places around the world, including the UK, is starting to become so expensive. It'll just become a thing where people seek other ways. I personally think that there are way better ways of learning about fashion and getting fashion experience than going to school. Like if you're a designer, if you're a fashion designer, you'll probably learn way more interning at some like Savile Row house than you would ever doing a 3-year degree at a school like CSM. The only issue with society, and it pisses me off, is a lot of times it's not really about how good you are at what you do. It's just about having qualifications that, to me, don't mean anything, even though to most people they mean something. So that's why I would still right now suggest getting a degree, because it would allow you to get your foot in the door at a lot of brands and to work there. Whereas you could be better than everyone works there, but if you don't have a degree, it's just like you don't have the required qualifications for this job. I think it's a very dumb way that people employ these days, and I hope that that improves, and I hope that employment sooner or later that people will find a way to just hire people based on how good they are and how good their actual skills are rather than some like piece of paper. That makes sense. Oh, the next question is really interesting. It says, what are your thoughts about ordinary men dressing so monotone as if they are limited to wear a shirt and jeans for the rest of their lives? Every season we get introduced to new ideas and impulses, but we don't see the mass changing. It has been about 40 years now that JPG, I'm guessing you're saying Jean-Paul Gaultier, tried to raise awareness and convert our perception of masculinity. Now, this, first of all, is an amazing question, and it's such a complicated thing for me to answer. It would literally, like, I have an answer in my head. It would take me about an hour to properly describe why men's fashion is the way it is. But to kind of summarize, one of the reasons why fashion is the way it is now, and I will specify and say the West, because I feel like in other regions, like my home country, Nigeria, I feel like a lot of men dress quite extravagantly. They wear a lot of color, a lot of like flowy fabrics. That is also the case in a lot of like other African countries and other Asian countries. If you look at like the traditional dress of like India and what men wear there, it is quite extravagant. It is quite colorful. Very ostentatious in a way. So I guess this is more of like a Western thing, but I would say that the French Revolution is the reason why men's fashion is so boring. And I will explain kind of in a summary. And just to kind of summarize what happened with the French Revolution, because I feel like a lot of people know what the French Revolution is, obviously. It's a big part of history. But a lot of people might not know the fashion angle of it. So in the 18th century, France was a country that had a lot of war because France was trying to cement itself as a global superpower. I mean, France literally colonized a lot of the world. So they spent so much money going to war that the country was in financial turmoil by the 18th century. So there were a lot of beggars, there were a lot of poor people. The financial situation was quite dire. The middle class and the upper class kind of paid all the tax for these continued wars. And there was just a lot of unrest in France. Now, at the time of the French Revolution, the king was King Louis XVI, and then his wife was Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette is literally someone we talk about all the time in fashion. She's like a household name because of her collection of clothing. She was quite ostentatious. She spent a lot of France's money on just clothes and couture dresses and stuff like that. And that was also one of the reasons why the people of France, like the common people, hated her, because they felt like she was really wasteful with money at a time when people didn't even have food to eat. And then you just have like this young woman just like buying all these couture dresses. And also it's good to also note that when King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette got into power, they were like really young. I think they were like teenagers. So they were also seen as like these immature people that didn't really have a connection. They didn't really understand the plight of the everyday person. So these the anger of the common people obviously is what led to the French Revolution, as most people know. And that's why they started to attack aristocrats and the upper class and the royals. They took over their property, all those things. Now, where the fashion angle comes in is a lot of the aristocrats fled France at the time when this was happening. But also something else that happened was the aristocrats that did stay for whatever reason, maybe they couldn't escape or they just wanted to stay, they actually decided that they needed to dress like common people so that they wouldn't be identified easily by everyone. So then this idea kind of started this idea of like a universal uniform, like everyone wearing the same thing. And obviously when the French Revolution had like ended and democracy was instated into the French society, I guess, that idea of like people wearing a uniform became cemented in French society because people were really annoyed and angry with the fact that I think they just didn't like any symbol of aristocracy. They didn't like anything that had to do with people not being seen as equals. So every symbol of being an aristocrat, from the extravagant way that people used to dress, the extravagant colors, everyone went completely away from that. That's why people started to wear dark colors. People went from wearing all these like frocks and frills and high heels. Men used to wear high heels back then. They got rid of those. Men started wearing like suits and trousers and shoes, and they didn't have all these like wigs. Instead, people had short hair. That's how fashion completely changed. Now, fashion is very complicated, so that's not the only reason why people are dressing like that, and that's not the only reason why people are wearing dark colors. If you go back to like the 16th century, you literally see men wearing like black coats with white ruffs. It was in the 16th century, actually, 16th and 17th century, there was this idea that black was like a masculine thing, and those ideas had already been coming in. So I think by the French Revolution, these ideas just became cemented, especially across the West. And actually, there was an amazing exhibition that the V&A did last year. It was called Fashioning Masculinities. This is, because it was in collaboration with Gucci, this is actually the book from the exhibition. So this is what the book looks like. And they literally, this whole book is just showing how menswear has developed over the years. Like quite literally, you guys can probably see, I'll show you some of the pages. So it goes from like all the way back in time to the modern day. And there are so many interesting quotes about sort of when everything became dark and how menswear became boring, to why men adopted black, and kind of like the ideas back then of why men were wearing dark colors. And I'll put these things on the screen and you can pause the video if you want to sort of read these. But of course, aristocrats, upper class, upper society, they always find a way of differentiating themselves. So it just went from a quite clear and obvious, I'm wearing certain colors that you can't wear because I'm an aristocrat, I'm a royal, my wig is this high because I'm this important in society. It just changed into sort of fabrics used. So even though people started to wear what seemingly looked like the same clothes, the people that were richer would just be wearing things with like fabrics that are way more expensive, or things that are dyed way better, things that are constructed way better. So that then became the differentiator. And since then, menswear has kind of just stayed the same, just the same like short hair, suit. That's why even if you think of like the idea of like what is considered like a responsible man, it's considered like a man with like short hair that wears like suits and stuff, suit and tie and stuff. It's quite funny, but men's wear in the mainstream, I'm not talking about in our tiny circle of the people that watch this channel that watch runway shows. Most men that go to work, especially in the West, they wear suits and they have to dress in this like corporate uniform. And so that's kind of just how menswear has been. If you look at the Met Gala, it's so annoying when like you see women wearing these amazing gowns, or women just wearing just really interesting things. And then most of the men, not all, but most of the men just wear a black tuxedo and a black tie every single Met Gala. It's like, my God, like, can you wear something interesting? But these things are complicated because if you think of the French Revolution, and that's why I said it would take me like hours to literally talk about this properly. But if you think of the French Revolution, the reason why a uniform was adopted is because people were trying to break down barriers and to cancel all symbols of aristocracy, which back then was dressing in a very flamboyant way. But now, if you dress flamboyantly, it doesn't come with the same ideals of I'm wearing this because I'm trying to show you my social class. If you want to wear bright colors, you just wear it because you like bright colors. So it doesn't come with the same ideals, but for some reason, people just still don't want to wear stuff that's like not boring, like most people at least. But there's also other reasons why you wouldn't want to dress that way. There can be quite serious consequences to dressing flamboyantly. Like for example, I get shocked by the kind of things that I wear that shocks other people. I literally have this Rick Owens distressed denim jacket, and every time I wear it, people look at me funny, like I'm wearing the most outlandish thing. And in my head, I'm just like, it's literally a denim jacket that's distressed. There is nothing crazy about this jacket. But that just goes to show you how conservative the average man is, or how they're just not willing to step outside of any sort of boundary. And I guess I'm kind of lucky. I live in London. It's one of the most fashion-forward cities in the world. You can kind of get away with wearing most things. But in a lot of places in the world, if you wear certain things as a child or as a young kid, a young teen, you'll probably get bullied. It might lead to physical violence. Even as an adult, what you wear could lead to physical violence. I also happen to be 6'2" and huge, so I've never had someone verbally abuse me for what I wear, even though I can tell when people are looking at me funny with like what I'm wearing, but no one would actually say anything, or no one would actually try to attack me because of what I'm wearing. But that might not be the case for most people. So there are actually those things that you have to mention. So I think there's so many societal reasons why menswear I just feel like won't really develop past what it is right now. But I really hope that something happens in society that means that men feel like they can just wear what they want to wear and express themselves how they want to express themselves. Because to me, at the end of the day, it's just clothes. Like, I don't understand why these things have to be so rigid. Like, why a man wears a certain thing and everyone goes crazy. Like, a man wears a skirt and everyone loses their mind. It's like, it's a piece of fabric. It's clothing. Like, what is so crazy about a man just wearing a piece of fabric designed in a different way? It's so weird how, like, single-minded and narrow-minded a lot of people are. Especially, like, if we talk about the masses, like, the everyday person is about fashion. It just, like, blows my mind. But yeah, so I guess that's kind of like my explanation as to why the everyday man kind of dresses in a very boring, monotonous, dark fabric way. And yeah, I don't really know how that's going to change. There's so many designers that have tried to, you know, challenge what masculinity means in terms of clothing. If we think of fashion designers like Alessandro Michele at Gucci, we think of, like you said, designers like Jean-Paul Gaultier, but it hasn't really done anything to change what the masses wear, in my opinion. But yeah, really, really, really good question. Now, this question is, how can luxury brands be profitable with such high prices? So I'm not sure the person that wrote this question, if you've watched my channel for a while, but this is definitely something that I've answered a few times, but I'll answer it again. It's basically because what makes fashion brands the most money are the products that cost the least. So brands have something for every single level of, like, financial power, I guess. Like spending power. So they have the haute couture stuff for the rich of the rich. They have the mid-tier stuff for the people in the middle. And then they have the stuff at the bottom for, you know, people that, like the everyday person, or people like students, or people like me, people that don't have a lot of money, don't earn a lot, right? So most of the stuff that makes most of the money are things like the belts, makeup, cosmetics, perfume, socks, other accessories. Those are the things that are the cheapest things that these brands sell. Most people are not buying the jacket for £2,000 that you see on the runway, and they're certainly not buying the $20,000 jacket. Majority of the money that they make comes from the products that they sell at the bottom, like the footwear and the perfume and stuff. So that's how they're so profitable. So just wanted to pause it quickly because I'm editing the video and I forgot to mention something really important. So when you look at the demographics of who buys fragrances, it's majority women that buy fragrances and perfumes. So there's still a huge potential for growth for a lot of these brands in terms of convincing men that they should buy fragrances. And that's exactly what's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years. So if anything, these brands are just going to make even more money by increasing the demographic of people that buy the fragrances. If you just look at the stats, like, it's very obvious to see where this is going. They sell you a dream with these runway shows, and with the fact that they do actually have products that cost $20,000. So when people buy the $50 perfume, they feel like they're part of the same world of a brand that sells products to other people for $20,000. But obviously it's not the same thing, but that's the brilliance of a lot of these brands, that they're able to market it like it is the same thing. So yeah, that's how luxury brands are so profitable, even though it seems that a lot of the stuff that they sell is really expensive, but not everything is actually that expensive. Like some of these brands, like Calvin Klein, you can buy Calvin Klein fragrance for like $20-$30. So yeah. So the last question is, what are the things you don't enjoy about fashion and think should either be ended or changed? And how would you change it if you had the opportunity? Oh, another really good question. I mean, there's so many things I don't like about fashion that I think should be changed. I'll try to keep it short and keep it within a few things. So one of the things I don't like about fashion is how fast-paced it is. I think that because fashion is so fast-paced, because designers have to create like tens and tens of collections a year, a lot of the creative output, especially nowadays, is really horrible. Like I feel like a lot of the major luxury fashion brands, the clothing that they put out is so uninspired and it's so boring. And it's actually quite terrible in a lot of ways. But it's because of the workload on the designers, them having to create 15 plus collections a year, including like 8 runway collections a year, in like menswear, women's wear, resorts, like couture. It's way too much. So I think I wish fashion would just slow down a bit. People would have less collections, and everything would not be so fast paced. I think that would make fashion a lot better. I think it would also slow down the overconsumption within fashion. I think people would consume less if fashion wasn't always pushing different products at you. Of course, that's a money issue. Brands want to maximize their profit, so they're going to try and market and sell as many things as like humanly possible. I personally don't like that aspect of fashion. So if I could change it, I would, but literally there's no way I could change that. Another thing is also the hypocrisy within fashion, especially when it comes to sustainability. Like anytime people have a conversation about sustainability in fashion, it does my head in. Because the amount of hypocrisy is insane. Everyone knows that the ultimate sustainability argument is that there are more clothes in the world right now than humans could possibly consume. Which means that if you have any sort of fashion brand that's creating any sort of fashion, it's already inherently unsustainable. Because if you stop the production of your clothes, there'll still be enough clothes in the world to go around. But that has to do with, we have to normalize people wearing secondhand clothing. So if you have a jacket that you don't want to wear, sell it on to someone else that would appreciate it. And I wish more people were okay with wearing secondhand clothing, which a lot of people still aren't. And so that's one thing. And so when brands talk about, oh, I have a sustainable brand, and they literally produce like millions of garments a year, I'm just like, how could your brand possibly be sustainable, even if you're using some organic cotton? Well, they always have some like stupid thing that proves that they're sustainable, like they use organic cotton. And it's just crazy, the amount of hypocrisy and also the amount of people that fall for that crap. That, oh my God, I'm wearing some sustainable footwear, even though they literally made like 5 million pairs worldwide. It's like, come on. Like, that is not sustainable. And it's crazy. I won't mention names, but there's literally brands that are completely known as like sustainability experts and big voices in fashion, and they're literally the most unsustainable brands ever. And I just don't like fashion is actually quite funny as an industry, like how I don't want to be as mean to say brain dead, but how just oblivious to everything a lot of people act or behave. Or I think it's just like willful ignorance. Like I'll literally go to like there's certain events about sustainability and fashion that are sponsored by companies like Coke, for example. Like, yeah, it's just crazy. So that's one thing I've always thought. That's why I don't really like talking about sustainability. I just think anytime we have that conversation, it's going to be really hypocritical. And I think my opinion on it has become way more extreme as time has progressed, because I'm just like, yeah, this is just like a bunch of crap. So I guess that's one thing I don't like. But yeah, those are all the questions for this video. Thank you very much for submitting these questions to the people that did submit them. Thank you very much to you guys for watching. Comment down your thoughts on all the questions or my opinions below. And if you want access to really interesting extra content, consider subscribing to my Patreon. The link will be in the description down below. I talk about a lot of different things. We talk about fashion history, on my Patreon podcast. Right now, we're still reviewing the book How Luxury Lost Its Luster, which is a book that talks about how fashion transitioned from being about quality to just being about marketing and sales and commerce. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back with another video very soon.